Pop quiz. Name a car with a tow bar that can do nearly 200 miles an hour. No? How about an Audi RS6? Or in other words, the fastest way to get a trailer tent to the Dorset coast. This is a car that offers enormous practicality and even more enormous performance. So in reality what it is just a very big, very fast hot hatch. And that's the type of car that's incredibly popular in the UK. It won't surprise you to hear then that the UK is actually an incredibly big market for the RS6. Only its home country of Germany buys more of these cars than us. So how do you replace a car like the RS6? Well, you could do what Audi's done here and just offer loads more of what made the old car so popular. A bigger boot, more refinement, more tech, crucially more power, and, says Audi, an even better driving experience. Right, let's get into some numbers first of all then. We've got near as damn it 600 litres in the boot, we've got 600 horsepower under the bonnet, and 800 newton metres of torque. All of that goes through an 8-speed automatic gearbox and quattro all-wheel drive. Like the standard A6 and A7, this car features all-wheel steering. Unlike those cars, it has a quattro sport rear differential. All of that, of course, is designed to help put that absolutely monstrous amount of power and torque onto the road. And as such, this car can crack 0 to 62 in 3.6 seconds. There were two chassis setups for this car, one of which an adaptive steel suspension, the other which an air suspension setup. We only get the latter in the UK, which, given how firm this is even on quite forgiving Californian roads, I'm quite glad that we only get the air setup.
Since filming, Audi has decided to offer both chassis options in the UK. Although the steel setup is very firm, it does give the RS6 a kind of agility completely unbefitting of a 2-ton estate. So the choice is yours.
That's because on top of everything that this car offers in terms of performance and its big boot and its space for 5 and all the rest of it, what this needs to be able to do really well is work as a daily car. The performance is a bit of a given really. What's really surprising is just how quiet and comfortable this is. New for this car is a 48 volt mild hybrid system. This is the first time an Audi RS6 has been electrified like that. Not only of course does this help with economy but also refinement, particularly the active cylinder on demand system in this car. That means you can coast along using only half the engine when you don't need all the power, or in fact none of it at all thanks to that 48 volt mild hybrid system. Brakes in this car that we're driving are incredibly strong. That's because they're the optional carbon ceramics. If you want to unlock the very highest top speed of this car, which is 189 miles an hour, not sure why you would, you have to get the carbon ceramics with that. It's kind of a middling speed that you can unlock in between the two, or there's the standard 155 mile an hour top speed, which frankly given our roads is probably more than fast enough. I can understand it if you lived in Germany and you use the Autobahn quite frequently, why you would want that near 200 mile an hour top speed, but in the UK it's really only spec'd if you want to show off. And that kind of brings me neatly onto the exterior styling of this car, which is kind of a bit more divisive this time around. Previous incarnations of the RS6 have really looked, although quite a bit more sporty than the standard car, not a million miles away from it in terms of design. This car, however, is almost completely new. It's only really things like the doors and the roof that remain from the old car, and that means that it does have quite a different look to a standard A6. Now, I imagine that's going to appeal to a certain type of buyer, but surely part of the RS6's appeal was that it wasn't too showy. You could kind of debadge it and people wouldn't be too sure what you were driving. Audi's engineers say they've reworked the chassis this time to make this car a lot more fun to drive. The old car was obviously incredibly fast and this one's not really much different to that, but what's very different this time around is just quite how keenly this thing turns in. It's of course helped by the rear wheel steering and the diff. There's that huge amount of mid-corner grip that you get from the quattro all-wheel drive system, and then an enormous amount of power on the exit of the corner as well. Rear wheel steer is really bizarre. If you just feel it just off the centre of the steering there, you can really feel it kind of wiggling the back end of the car around. It means that while there is a little bit of a flat spot there in the middle of the steering where not a lot happens, it does speed up incredibly quickly just off the centre. I think I was also never really that bothered about the handling of the old car because I'm not taking my Audi RS6 on the track. Really all it needs to do is be incredibly fast day to day and very comfortable as well. What's nice this time is that means it just adds another dimension of appeal to this car. It doesn't really have that many rivals to stack up against when you look at what else is available. It's really only a Mercedes-AMG E63, I guess a Porsche Panamera Sport Turismo. There's not much around that's this sort of size and this sort of power. In terms of the actual driving feel of this car, I mean, while they've changed a lot to make it a lot more agile and to handle a lot better, it is still kind of classic fast Audi. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing because obviously this attracts a certain type of buyer and you don't want to alienate all of those people when you bring out the new version of the car. The biggest difference really is just how agile this car feels, and that's of course down to that active rear wheel steering. You can really feel the rear axle kind of pushing you round the corner. It's not just a case of the back end of this car sort of following the front round the corner. Bearing in mind this is a very long car, you can really feel the effect of that rear wheel steering. Audi says there's kind of a bigger bandwidth this time between the comfort mode and the sportier mode. It certainly feels it in this most sporty mode on this road. It's incredibly firm. As a trade-off to that, there's a remarkable lack of roll when you go into a corner. Bearing in mind this is a big, heavy car. You turn it in, you'd expect it to roll quite a lot, and it just doesn't. It's obviously a much bigger differentiation this time around with this RS6 and the rest of the A6 range, in that previously you could get an S6, which was kind of like a detuned RS6. This time around, of course, that car features a diesel engine. That means there's now a massive gap, really, in what's offered by the S6 and the RS6. The S6 has kind of become the real day-to-day car that you could use every day, and it's not going to cost you £1 million to fill up every time you go to the petrol station, whereas this car is almost elevated to another level above that. A few clues in the cabin that you're not driving just a standard everyday A6 are the fact that obviously you've got Alcantara clad wheel. These new aluminium kind of feel shift paddles are much better than the plastic ones in the old car. Everything else though benefits from the same excellent interior design that you get in the A6. So you get the massive screen, you get the secondary screen there for your climate controls, you get the Audi digital dials as well, which in this I've got a RS specific layout, which is kind of a white on black that's really easy to spot. Another new feature this time around is the RS mode button on the wheel here that we've seen in other fast Audi cars. That allows you to change which driving mode you're in without having to reach around and sort of fiddle around down here on the centre console. It's kind of like what we've seen in fast BMWs actually. You get a RS1 and RS2 mode, and you can tailor each one depending on exactly what it is that you want. Now, I started this video by saying to you that this is kind of like a big, powerful hot hatch, and you might have at that time thought, what on earth is this man talking about? The thing is though, all of that chassis tech means that you kind of drive this thing like a big front wheel drive hot hatch. You've just got so much confidence just to stick it into a corner and know that there's going to be enough grip. The only difference really being the absolutely enormous amount of power that you've got to accelerate away. Obviously, despite its enormous appeal, this is still a bit of a niche, this car, and that means that the buyers of it hold quite a lot of power when it comes to what happens with the next car. As such, Audi said it's asked its customers this time around what they wanted in the RS6. So you've ended up with things like cooled Super Sport bucket seats, which the old car didn't have. You can also get a tow bar on both chassis now, and as I said earlier, up to that remarkable top speed of 189 miles an hour. What's really interesting though is the fact that unlike the S6, which has got a radically different engine than it did before, this car still uses a 4-litre twin turbocharged V8. And that's great news really, because it's got an enormous amount of character. It sounds fantastic, it's got a huge amount of torque from the get-go. You don't really ever feel like you need to shift down, you can just sort of lean on third gear out of a corner and know that there's always going to be a bit of boost to carry you through. That means this car features a huge amount of ease of use, really, whether you're in the comfort mode kind of wafting about or whether you're in RS1 or RS2 on a fast and windy road like this. Either way, it's a really easy thing to drive. Now, if you indulge a slightly geeky observation, what I said earlier about this having an 8-speed automatic gearbox, that means it's not a dual clutch automatic gearbox. Well, that's not exactly the end of the world. It does mean that there's sort of a crispness in the gear shift that this car kind of lacks. If you drive one of Audi's slightly less powerful cars like an RS3 that does have a dual clutch gearbox in it, it really kind of whips through the gears. There's a kind of a delay between a pull of the paddle and a gear shift. Now, while that's not the end of the world, and it is certainly a lot better than the old RS6, it does lend a kind of slightly lazy driving style to this car. It does mean you are a little bit more reliant on that engine's enormous amount of torque to haul you out of a corner rather than downshifting and getting into the peak of its power. And that's a bit of a shame really, because when you rev this engine out it sounds absolutely fantastic. This might seem a slightly odd thing to say, but I was genuinely a little bit worried when Audi said they'd made this car so much better to drive. Generally speaking, if you make a car better to drive, you make it harder to live with day to day, and in my opinion that's kind of what this car's all about. Perhaps let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody's taking their Audi RS6 on a racetrack. What this car needs to do is be incredibly comfortable and refined day to day, and then explosively fast when you come across a road like this. What's great is that this time around, through the deployment of some incredibly clever technology, Audi has managed to improve both ends of the RS6 spectrum. This is a car that would now be incredibly easy to live with day to day while keeping pace with its more dynamic rivals.